Wrought iron. This is the historic material of the blacksmith, and this has been used for centuries before the mild steel that we use now came into being. Wrought iron gets its name because it is essentially iron that has been wrought, or in other words, it has been hammered out to refine it. It is repeatedly drawn out, fluxed, welded, and drawn out again to refine it, and the more that's done, the higher the quality of the wrought iron. That gives it a unique fibrous appearance. You can see where these pieces have been cut and bent that it starts to split kind of like wood. This actually fractured more than I would have expected. Usually it will be a little bit stringier. But mild steel just doesn't really behave that way. That is quite unique to wrought iron. And there's one way you can tell wrought iron. Here you can see where some of the fibers in this piece that have been drawn out because it got too cold, it's separating along the layers of the wrought iron. You can also often tell wrought iron by the way it rusts. It'll get deep pitted rust on the surface, but it doesn't go very deep. And that's because the flux used in the processing was a silica sand in many cases. And that silica sand forms kind of a glassy layer in there, little glassy inclusions that don't rust. So wrought iron might actually last longer in use than mild steel, even though it might look a lot nastier faster, if that makes any sense to you. Wrought iron has a very low carbon content. So when you spark test it, it has a much plainer, less complex spark than steel does, especially tool steel, which is what the piece was I did in the middle there. Because of the low carbon content, wrought iron is softer and more malleable than steel is, which can be both a good and a bad thing. Also, because of the low carbon content, it can be worked at a much higher temperature. Steel with any kind of carbon content, even mild steel, burns at a lower temperature than wrought iron does. It also welds at a lower temperature. So wrought iron, because you can get it so much hotter, is easier to weld. However, wrought iron also falls apart easier if you don't work it at the right temperatures or if you don't pay attention to proper procedures. It can be a little problematic. The biggest problem with wrought iron is it's very difficult to find now. It hasn't been made in decades in this country, in the United States, and I'm not sure that it's being made anywhere worldwide anymore. I think there are some historic sites that are reprocessing old wrought iron just for the sake of the historic reenactment. But for the most part, the wrought iron that has been in use in bridges and buildings and old fences and gates that you might be able to salvage is about the only wrought iron that is available to you as a blacksmith these days, which is why we mostly use mild steel. And for most things, mild steel is probably a superior material. It's a little harder to weld, and the grain in the wrought iron can be of use at some times, but it can also be very problematic and require some special techniques. But that isn't what I wanted to talk to you about today. If you had a blown glass vase for putting flowers in, and you made a somewhat of a copy, use the same style, and made a vase out of plastic, would you refer to the plastic vase as blown glass? I wouldn't. There's no glass. It hadn't been blown. It's still a vase, so you would call it a plastic vase. But for some reason, at least in the U.S., people refer to this junk as wrought iron. It is iron-based because it is made out of mild steel, but it is not wrought iron. It is not the material wrought iron, and none of this has truly been wrought in the sense that it was forged by a blacksmith. It has most likely all been done cold. It has really ugly splattery welds, or splatter clear down into here. It's just, this is the worst excuse for ironwork. If some of you are doing this, I apologize. I'm not really trying to insult you personally, but this is not what we're about as blacksmiths. But for some reason, this is what the rest of the world thinks of, or I should say the rest of the United States. I don't know if they call it that in Europe or not. But they think of this is wrought iron. This is what they think of if you say wrought iron. So why is this important? Well, one, I think this is something we need to, as blacksmiths, work to improve. And I actually paid good money for this piece, not a lot of money, but real money, for one reason, and that is to use it as an example. I think we need to make another one of these, something very similar, and use all traditional blacksmithing techniques. We will do pickets with forged mortise and tenon joints on it, and head the ends of the tenons with a hammer. We will assemble the scrolls with collars. We will forge the scrolls so they don't have these silly little kinks that show that they were bent by a machine. And we're certainly not going to use half-inch round tubing as the basis for it. It probably won't look exactly like this. I don't want it to look exactly like this, but we're going to use this as a basis. And I think we will probably take several videos and may not even get started on it until my hand is completely better, because I really can't do most of that stuff right now. But just something to think about. Think about design in your own mind, and we'll see if what you thought is what I come up with. But what would you do to make something that serves this purpose? I think I will actually make something that fits one of the shop windows, so it'll have to be a little bit bigger, so it actually has a place to go when we're done. But that's just an idea for future videos, and I thought I would throw that out, and I'm going to start thinking about it. I may start doing some sketches. If you're at all interested in kind of following along with a project like that, feel free to tackle something like that in your own shop and see what you come up with. Even if you forge the elements and weld them together so it is a forged and fabricated piece, it will be far superior to the cold bent, harsh edges and corners that are in this particular piece of junk here. So that's where I'm going to go with that. Just a short little video on the concept and about wrought iron and what is and isn't wrought iron. So I hope you enjoyed it, and we will get back to some more videos later. Right now it's getting cold. I'm going to go back in the house and warm up and edit this video. Love it if you give it a thumbs up. Love it if you hit the subscribe button. In the meantime, head on out to your shop, have some fun, make something, but stay safe, wear your safety glasses. See you next time.